The Warhammer 40K universe is no stranger to cosmic horror. It's full of some terrifying monsters, characters, and events that leave us in a constant state of dread whenever we read about them. And out of all of 40K's terrifying stories, the ones that are the most interesting to the community are often the ones that to this day have still gone unexplained. So today we're going to be talking about 5 more of 40K's creepiest mysteries. We'll talk about things like a Tyranid Hive fleet that doesn't seem to act like any of the others, and appears to be building something truly terrifying. A dreaded area of space that long ago saw the rise of a cosmic horror that killed untold billions before vanishing without a trace. And a terrifying creature of unknown origin that is locked away in the Xenos Bestiarium and considered threat level ultraviolet. We're going to be talking about all that and a whole lot more, but before we dive headfirst into the grimdark, a quick shout out to this video's sponsor.
War Thunder is the most comprehensive vehicle combat game ever made, and allows you to play as more than 2,000 tanks, planes, helicopters, and ships in dynamic combined arms PvP battles. Every single vehicle in this game is incredibly detailed and modeled down to their individual components, creating an insanely immersive combat experience. The game's collection of vehicles is frankly ridiculous, and spans over 100 years of development from the 1920s all the way up to the present day. The graphics in this game are absolutely unreal and rendered in beautiful 4K resolution. It's filled with authentic sound effects and beautiful music that create a fully immersive atmosphere. That immersion is taken to an even further level through the dynamic and detailed vehicle damage models. This game doesn't have hit points. Vehicles suffer actual damage to all of their components and crew. They even have this really cool X-ray damage feature that shows exactly what happened to you whenever you end up destroyed. My favorite part about War Thunder is that you don't need anything more than a mouse and keyboard to control all of its planes, thanks to its intuitive mouse aim mode. War Thunder is available on PC, Xbox Series X and S, PlayStation 5, and the previous console generation. Click on the link in the description of this video to download the game for free today and receive a huge bonus pack including multiple premium vehicles, a premium account trial, boosters, and a whole lot more. Big thanks to War Thunder for sponsoring this video. Xenos Bestiarium, Subject Number 696. Subject Number 696 was an unknown alien lifeform that was discovered by the Death Watch on the space hulk known as Damnatio Modulis. The ship itself had disappeared about 160 years earlier when it got separated from a rogue trader fleet during an unexpected warp storm. When the ship finally reappeared, it had massive mile-long scars of rent metal across its surface, indicative of the attacks of Tyranid bioships. The case at first seemed open and shut. After having been separated, it was attacked by the Tyranids. But when the Death Watch boarded the Hulk in order to investigate and search for survivors, they encountered something far more terrifying and mysterious than the Hive fleets have ever managed to produce. The Death Watch chaplain Titus Strom requested to lead the investigative kill team himself. He was a duty-bound old warrior, so such a deviation from his normal duties seemed like a strange request. He claimed that he shared a strong premonition that they were dealing with something they didn't understand, and a great foe lurked inside the haunted passages of the Modulis. After searching the entirety of the ship, no trace of the crew was ever located. No desecrated corpses, no half-eaten limbs, nothing that would have been indicative of Tyranids or the foul blasphemy of Chaos worshippers. When the Death Watch reached the Command Cathedral, however, what happened to the crew was made abundantly clear, as they encountered a massive twisted creature that rested upon a nest of gore-soaked human remains. The thing was a slithering monstrosity, an amalgamation of claws and tentacles, an abomination seemingly wrought from equal parts bird, squid, and spider. Without a moment of hesitation, the Battle Brothers opened up with a vicious storm of bolter fire and searing beams of plasma. Their weapons were seemingly worthless. It had no weak point, no central mass or brainstem. For every limb that burned away, 2 more would instantly grow to replace it. The more they fought, the more the entity's form twisted and hardened against their attacks, their bolter fire serving only to rouse the creature from its morbid consumption. This surely would have been where the kill team would meet its end if it had not been for the chaplain releasing a relic that he had carried with him for 2 centuries, for reasons known only to him. He unleashed the Temporis Agitans, a master-crafted stasis bomb the size of a human fist that upon its detonation could render the flow of time inert in a small radius for a limited duration. The abomination was completely engulfed by the stasis field in a brilliant flash. With the threat contained, the chaplain pondered what to do with their quarry, briefly considering redirecting the Space Hulk to drift into the nearest star. But his duty to the long vigil stayed his hand. Whatever this thing was, it needed to be studied and understood in case there were more of them out there. Thus it was determined that they would transfer the creature back to Watch Fortress Iriok, where it would be held within the Xenos Bestiarium. Despite the exhaustive experimentations of the members of the Adeptus Biologists tasked with studying and experimenting on subject number 696, all of their efforts ultimately proved to be fruitless. Early theories indicated that it was either a previously unknown strain of Tyranid evolution, or perhaps a warp-induced mutation. Despite the similarities, the entity has been proven to be without a doubt not linked to the Hive fleets, and despite its appearance, doesn't bear the telltale signs of the corrupting influence of the Imperium. No matter what weapon they use against it, nothing has been able to kill it. It regenerates from any injury remarkably quickly. Although exactly what this thing is yet to be determined, the prevailing belief is a terrifying concept that is difficult to wrap our minds around. It has been theorized that subject number 696 is only a minuscule fragment of a much larger entity dwelling within another dimension that had only briefly penetrated the veil between realities. From our perspective, it would be as if we were a bunch of fish in a pond, with no knowledge of anything outside of the waters we call home. Subject 696 is like the tip of a giant's finger, suddenly plunging into our humble little body of water. Humanity knows nothing of the giant or the realm he inhabits, and all the Death Watch could perceive was that singular digit. Whether or not the creature truly was one of a kind, if it can be killed, and what its exact nature actually is, remains a mysterious puzzle with no satisfactory answers. The Harrowing and the Echoing Vault. The Warhammer 40K universe is no stranger to tragedy on a simply incomprehensible scale. Mass extinctions, apocalypses great and small, and all manner of horrifying events have plagued the cosmos since time began. Many of these events have been well documented and serve as a warning for all those that would come later. However, the truth is that the vast majority of them remain shrouded in mystery. It is perhaps more likely that for every one of these tragedies we get a brief glimpse into, there are perhaps 1,000 more mass extinctions or disappearances that have been completely covered up by the sands of time. One such bizarre instance that we know frighteningly very little about is an event referred to only as the Harrowing, a terrifying atrocity that just about every single mention of within Imperial records has either been purged or placed under heavy restriction, locked away within the archives of the Holy Ordos. Outside of those very few remaining records, the only references that exist of the Harrowing can be found in obscure passages within certain Space Marine battle sagas or ancient Mechanicus data canonicals. This event took place in the mid-32nd millennium, just under 10,000 years ago and only a couple of hundred years after the Horus Heresy came to an end. The mid-32nd millennium was a legendary time period of anarchy for the Imperium, as it attempted to piece itself back together and undo the cataclysmic damage the War Master had inflicted. Now, according to the legends, a strange artifact was at one point discovered by an unknown exploratory fleet, first documented in the Halo Stars region of northern Segmentum Obscurus. It was said to be a vast labyrinthian construct seemingly spun of dust and magnetism. Now, due to the fragmentary nature of the surviving references of these times, the sources tend to contradict themselves. Now, one source claims that the device was first encountered in the dreaded Mandragora region, whereas others claim it was first seen as far away as the Unbeholden Reaches. Regardless of its origins, this terrifying labyrinth would come to be known as the Echoing Vault. No records exist of any attempt to study and/or gain any form of deeper insight into the nature of the device itself, but one source claims that it was believed to be an embassy from an unknown realm of existence. When the device opened, it unleashed a wave of eldritch horror never before seen by mankind. It was an invasion that the wounded Imperium was without question unprepared to fight against. Mankind would suffer unprecedented losses, including huge swaths of the Adeptus Astartes and Inquisition forces that futilely attempted to fight back against them. The terrible creatures that were unleashed from the vault rampaged into real space and unleashed an era of destruction that saw thousands of Imperial and Xenos worlds alike completely stripped of life. Now, as I mentioned before, we are given practically no insight into the nature of these cosmic horrors, so we do not know their origins, whether or not they were Xenos or demonic in nature, or what their ultimate purpose actually was. And perhaps even more frustrating, the only records that exist that elaborate on their forms describes them as an abhorrent terror that disobeyed the known laws of physics, and simply by being in close proximity to them alone was enough to kill or drive the unprotected mind insane. Their true name was never documented, and every time they are referenced, they are only referred to as the Harrowing. The records that have been archived by the Inquisition state that the unknown entities were eventually defeated, and pushed back by the combined efforts of many different Imperial factions. But there also exists an account by the Dark Mechanicum that further elaborates that they were only able to do so through a blasphemous fusion of ancient archaeotech and sorcerous lore. That the Adeptus Mechanicus had employed a forbidden weapon from the Dark Age of technology in order to destroy some kind of bridge that the creatures used to pass from the labyrinth into real space, thus sealing the breach between dimensions. Most do not know the Harrowing ever took place, and to those who know anything about it, it is little more than a legend. But to those who believe the tales, they point to the numerous dead worlds within the Eastern Fringe as clear evidence of the Echoing Vault's existence. Perhaps even more terrifying is that there are people out there who have bought these legends hook, line, and sinker, and would seek to locate the Echoing Vault for their own nefarious purposes, believing that somewhere out there, whether in an unexplored section of real space, within the vast ocean of the Imperium, or possibly in an undocumented realm betwixt the two, the Harrowing yet wait patiently for the hour of their return. The mystery of Hive Fleet Tiamet. Although it's true that each and every one of the documented Tyranid Hive fleets operate in their own distinct patterns, they all appear to be driven by a biological need to consume, and in almost every instance, a Hive fleet's purpose is to completely strip every planet they encounter of organic life, render it into biomass, and produce more Tyranids, before moving on to continue their bloody alien harvest. There is, however, a Hive fleet that does not seem to operate like all of the rest, one that has demonstrated a bizarre pattern of behavior, wherein instead of completely stripping a planet, they instead infest it, cover it in strange Tyranid growths, and dedicate their fleets to its protection. This pattern of behavior completely contradicts everything that we think we know about the Tyranids, for as vast and terrifying of a threat they are to mankind's continued existence, the way they tend to operate was thought to be relatively predictable. The discovery of Hive Fleet Tiamet in the Eastern Fringe threw a figurative wrench into everything we thought we knew about them. The Tiamet system where the Hive Fleet gets its name was first discovered in the 35th millennium. Although the system contained approximately 7 worlds that were able to sustain life, all of them were without question death worlds. These planets could take the form of frigid ice worlds, voracious jungles full of terrifying predators, or arid wastelands. And because the region didn't seem like an immediately viable target for Imperial conquest, it would mostly go undisturbed for the next several thousand years. That was all until a small force of Eldari Rangers from Craftworld Eondon infiltrated the isolated system and learned its horrifying truth. Upon the jungle world of Zyphoria, the Rangers encountered something as baffling as its implications were terrifying. A single unknown Tyranid life form, the size of an entire continent. A massive, undulating organic construct, a superstructure of chitin and soft flesh that thrummed with immense psychic energy. When the Eldari approached the entity, many of their less psychically disciplined brothers and sisters were immediately driven into convulsions, their minds sent into shock by the sheer, overwhelming force of the construct's concentrated shadow in the warp. Aside from this little bit of information, what Hive Fleet Tiamet is attempting to accomplish here and what this thing's ultimate purpose is remains a concerning mystery. Even more troubling is that all attempts to study it are ultimately futile, for in its infinite alien wisdom, the Hive Mind has dedicated an entire Hive Fleet to its protection. In recent years, there have been several Genestealer cultist uprisings that seem to be connected to Tiamet. One such instance saw the cult known as the Choir of the Void rise up against the worshippers of the Dark Gods that had enslaved their planet. Their prophet preached of a savior race beyond the stars, that paradise awaited them in the Eastern Fringe. The last documented sighting of the cult was when their armada of captured Chaos ships was witnessed entering the Tiamet system. Additionally, the Death Watch has documented many instances of missing ships and lost fleets, pulsing their last known location in close proximity to the worlds claimed by Hive Fleet Tiamet. Whatever the Tyranids of Hive Fleet Tiamet are attempting to accomplish remains a concerning mystery for the Imperium. The enigma known as Artifact 9 Kappa Mu. The construct known as Artifact 9 Kappa Mu is a bizarre celestial body of unknown origin that has been cited as existing within the boundaries of the Sol system since the time period in which its earliest known charts were created. It has been floating around in our star system since before the modern day. Its name was given to it by the Mechanicum of Mars, and despite it seeming as if the name was derived from some form of organizational system, this couldn't be farther from the truth. We know practically nothing about this thing. The artifact itself is said to be a geodesic sphere of black metal that is approximately 30 kilometers in diameter, and looks something like a dark moon when viewed with the naked eye. The interior of the artifact consists of a spider web of different passages that link between a honeycomb network of large empty spaces that are open to the void. The disk additionally is surrounded by a huge cloud of debris, much like many other larger planetary bodies. What's strange here is that the artifact is not large enough to have its own gravitational field, yet somehow these debris have denied the laws of physics and have yet to be pulled away. The most truly baffling thing about the artifact is that it can only be viewed with the naked eye. When trying to look upon it with any form of auspex or scanning equipment, the construct is rendered completely invisible. Despite the Mechanicus having sent expeditions inside of the artifact on numerous occasions, they have yet to determine just about anything about it. They can't tell how it was made, what it was made from, what exactly its purpose is, and most importantly, whether or not it represents a threat to mankind. Encountering something like this is cause enough for concern, but the fact that it is located within the solar system, the birthplace of humanity, and the singularly most important system to the Imperium, makes it a threat of the highest caliber. Now, needless to say, many attempts have been made to destroy the artifact, all of which have ultimately been met with failure. Melta, seismic, and graviton charges have not even managed to scratch its surface. With no way of removing it and no indication of its purpose, the best thing the Mechanicus was able to do was set up a series of satellites around the artifact, broadcasting a signal to stay away from it. Even to this day, it still lurks out there floating around the Sol system, many believing that it predates the Dark Age of technology and may even be older than the human race itself. The only time I've ever actually read about this thing becoming important in the overall narrative of Warhammer 40K was during the novel Praetorian of Dorn, where the artifact briefly was used as an Alpha Legion rendezvous point. Disappointingly, the chapter in the book where this occurs doesn't actually give us a deeper insight into the artifact's nature, its origin, or its purpose. Maybe one day more secrets of this perplexing construct will be revealed, but in the meantime, it remains as one of the Sol system's most interesting mysteries. The Ghoul Stars and the Pale Wasting. One of the creepiest and most mysterious places in the Milky Way galaxy is an area of space referred to as the Ghoul Stars, a realm of dead worlds whose primary inhabitants are ancient creatures straight out of humanity's primal nightmares. My personal favorite of which being the Bone Kingdom of Drazik, a Necron world that has been long feared even by the Necrons themselves, as it is entirely populated by legions of flayed ones that wander the world's streets, fighting over bits of rotting meat and ruled over by a singular insane Necron. Not only are the Ghoul Stars said to be incredibly dangerous, but the area of space that they exist in is outside of the light of the Astronomicon, thus making the job of guiding the Imperium's fleets through its borders a nearly impossible task for navigators. Because of this, most navigators refuse to sail here at all. It wasn't always such a hostile place. Imperial records indicate that before the time of the Horus Heresy, humanity had managed to carve out an existence here, inhabiting many of its worlds. That would all tragically come to an end in the late 34th millennium, when an apocalyptic unknown Xenos threat emerged that sought to purge all human life that had come to inhabit the Ghoul Stars. This threat was known only as the Pale Wasting, and unfortunately we really aren't given a lot of insight into what these things actually were. The text is seemingly contradictory. One account refers to the Pale Wasting as a star-spawned plague that swept through humanity's many worlds, whereas another account refers to it as an apocalyptic struggle ushered forth by a host of nightmare engines that slaughtered everything they encountered. The threat was deemed so significant that the Nova Marines, alongside 11 other Space Marine chapters, were dispatched to combat the cosmic horror of the Ghoul Stars. The threat would ultimately be pushed back, but at great cost, for of all those deployed, each and every chapter would be utterly annihilated, with the exception of the Nova Marines themselves. By the time of the 42nd millennium, every record that existed that talked about what happened here had been purged from existence through the relentless efforts of the Inquisition, all except for a single document upon the throne world of Terra itself that commended the Nova Marines for their great bravery and sacrifice. As far as I'm aware, this was one of the largest single deployments of Marine chapters post-heresy, up until the Indomitus Crusade began, indicating that whatever the Pale Wasting actually was viewed as a truly terrifying threat to mankind. Some believe that the entities spoken of in the Pale Wasting were the Thexians of the Thexian Trade Empire, a vile Xenos race that is said to be incredibly gifted in the art of persuasion, and has pushed its influence on many other lesser-known Xenos species in order to manipulate them towards their cause. We don't know too much about them other than they apparently have the ability to mutate into a battle form that is said to be horrifying to behold. Now, I'll be honest, I'm not entirely convinced, as in my research I have found no indication that they are connected to the Pale Wasting, other than they happen to be another documented Xenospecies within the Ghoul Stars. The entirety of the Death Spectre chapter, one of two only known chapters that originated in the 13th Dark Founding, have been stationed on the world of Occludus, a monitoring world right outside of the Ghoul stars. Even after the destruction of Cadia, the forming of the Great Rift, and the Imperium being split in half, their thankless vigil was deemed too important to be abandoned, even when Guilliman sent out the call for all Loyalist forces to join him in the Indomitus Crusade. We are led to believe that the Pale Wasting was an event where the heroic forces of the Imperium managed to defeat a vile Xenos threat, one of thousands of such occasions, and this particular one was not important enough to keep written records of. If this is the case, and the Pale Wasting will really never return, then why has an entire chapter of Space Marines been deployed to keep a constant eye on the Ghoul stars? And that was 5 more of Warhammer 40k's creepiest mysteries. Which one was your favorite? Which one do you think was the most spooky? Are there any other creepy mysteries like this from 40k that you'd love to hear me talk about? I love hanging out and talking with y'all in the comment section, and honestly, I tend to learn more about 40k from you guys than just about anywhere else. So I look forward to reading all of your thoughts and opinions. Big thanks to everyone who supports the work that I do, and I'll catch y'all in the next one.